Welcome to Galactic Politics 101. Today's lesson, why the smartest empires in our illustrious cosmic neighborhood choose humans as allies, and why the extinct ones well. They're extinct precisely because they didn't. My name is Professor Zilb Knox, and I'll be your somewhat reluctant guide through this fascinating subject that absolutely no one asked me to explain, but here we are. The Milky Way galaxy, year 3457 by the standard galactic calendar, or as humans insist on calling it, Tuesday. In this vast expanse of space, countless civilizations have risen and fallen like particularly ambitious souffles. Some lasted millennia. Others barely made it past their first interstellar handshake before becoming cautionary tales in galactic history books. What's the difference between these two fates? One word, humans. Yes, those peculiar bipeds from that unremarkable blue-green planet in an utterly forgettable solar system. The ones who somehow managed to survive their own technological adolescence, despite their baffling tendency to invent weapons before figuring out how not to use them on themselves. Themselves. The species that discovered faster than light travel the week after they ran out of streaming shows to watch. The Zargosian Empire ruled 3 spiral arms for 12,000 years until they decided humans were too unpredictable to include in their defensive packs. They now exist solely as a fascinating layer of carbon dust spreading through the Cygnus sector. The Pelorian Dominion considered themselves the intellectual superiors of all species, right until a human mining colony accidentally discovered their cloaked invasion fleet by throwing rocks at space because we were bored. The Pelorians are now primarily studied by xenoarchaeologists with particularly strong hazmat suits. Meanwhile, the Thoraxian Empire, once considered the cosmic equivalent of the awkward middle child, has flourished into a major power after signing the Human Alliance Treaty of 442. The Luminary Coalition, previously known for their aesthetic achievements rather than military might, now commands respect across 17 sectors thanks to their human diplomatic corps. Is this a coincidence? The 37 extinct empires who dismissed human potential would say no if they could say anything at all. Consider this your survival guide. The galaxy is a dangerous place, filled with threats both known and unknown. Black holes, supernovae, quantum fluctuations, tax collectors. But perhaps nothing determines the longevity of an interstellar civilization more than their answer to one simple question. Do we want these bizarre, contradictory, impossibly adaptable humans on our side or not? Choose wisely. The cosmic graveyard is full of those who chose poorly. Admiral Krill stood on the command deck of the Thoraxian flagship unwavering precision, his 4 arms clasped behind his back in perfect military form. His exoskeleton gleamed under the ship's lighting, meticulous grooming evident in every polished plate. 3 of his eyes scanned the tactical displays while the 4th remained fixed on the ship's chronometer. The human representative is precisely 7 minutes and 42 seconds late, Krill noted, mandibles clicking in disapproval. Again. His first officer, Commander Thix, made a sound that the ship's translator rendered as a diplomatic cough. Perhaps Captain Reynolds is operating on what humans call fashionably late, Admiral. Fashion and military punctuality should never coexist in the same sentence, Commander Krill responded. The Thoraxian Empire has thrived for 8 centuries on precision and... The bridge doors whooshed open as Captain Jack Reynolds strode in, a container of something steaming in one hand and what appeared to be half-eaten pastry in the other. Morning, folks. Or is it evening? I can never keep track on these ships, Reynolds announced, taking a slurp from his container. Your artificial gravity's running about 0.02 gs high today, by the way. Makes my coffee taste different. Krill's exoskeleton practically vibrated with irritation. Captain Reynolds, we are gathered to discuss the imminent threat to the Proxima outpost, not your beverage sensitivities. Reynolds nodded amicably. Right you are, bug boy. Sorry, Admiral. Old Earth habit, giving people nicknames, means I like you. He tossed the remains of his pastry into a disposal unit without looking. It went in perfectly. So what's the situation with our friends in the Hive Collective? Still being Collective Y and Hive Y? Before Krill could respond, the ship's communication officer announced, Ambassador Vex Laura of the Luminary Coalition requests permission to board, Admiral. Granted, Krill said, straightening even further, if that were physically possible. Captain Reynolds, please attempt to comport yourself with at least a modicum of diplomatic decorum. When have I ever not? Reynolds asked with mock offense, brushing crumbs from his rumpled uniform. 5 minutes later, Ambassador Vex Laura glided onto the bridge. The Luminari were renowned for their bioluminescent skin and fluid movements, evolutionary adaptations from their ocean homeworld. Every step Vex Laura took seemed choreographed, trails of soft blue light following her fingertips. Admiral Krill, she acknowledged with a graceful nod. The Luminary Coalition extends its gratitude for hosting these critical discussions. Her voice carried the musical quality common to her species. Ambassador, Krill returned with a formal thoraxian salute. Your presence honors us. Vex Laura turned to Reynolds, her expression inscrutable but with a subtle brightness shift in her bioluminescence that those familiar with Luminari might recognize as amusement. Captain Reynolds, I see you remain unchanged since our last encounter. Ambassador Glowstick, Reynolds replied with a grin. Still the prettiest diplomat in the quadrant. Krill made a strangled sound that his translator wisely chose not to interpret. Vex Laura's skin pulsed briefly. I assume we're gathered to address the Hive Collective's recent activities. Their expansion toward the neutral territories violates 6 different interstellar treaties. Krill activated the main holographic display, revealing a strategic map of the disputed sectors. Precisely. Intelligence suggests they've been amassing forces near the Proxima outpost. If they take control of the quantum relay station there, they could disrupt communications across 3 spiral arms. Or worse, Reynolds added, suddenly serious. With that relay, they could potentially network their hive mind across sectors instantaneously. Right now, they've got a lag time between hive clusters. Remove that lag, and we face a truly unified collective, Vex Laura finished, her glow dimming with concern. Neither the Thoraxian Empire nor the Luminary Coalition has sufficient forces in the region to mount an effective defense, Krill continued. And our other allies are hesitant to engage the collective directly. They're scared, Reynolds translated bluntly. Can't blame them. Nobody wants to be the first on a hungry hive's menu. Which is why, Krill said, 4 eyes focusing intensely on Reynolds, we need the human fleet. Reynolds whistled. Now we're talking. But you know humans don't just jump into fights without good reason. He paused. Well, actually, historically speaking, that's not entirely occur. We are prepared to offer expanded mining rights in the Cygnus sector, Vex Laura interjected smoothly. Reynolds smiled. Now you're speaking our language, Ambassador. But there's one small problem. And that is? Krill asked warily. I'm going to need a lot more coffee. The Galactic Summit chamber aboard the neutral station Harmonious Discourse was an architectural marvel, designed to accommodate over 200 distinct species in relative comfort. The chamber's remarkable atmospheric barriers allowed methane breathers to sit beside oxygen-dependent life forms without anyone dying horribly, which, in the annals of interspecies diplomacy, was considered a baseline requirement for successful negotiations. Today, representatives from 27 spacefaring civilizations gathered in ascending rings, their positioning determined by complex algorithms balancing diplomatic rank, gravitational preferences, and who was least likely to accidentally eat whom. Admiral Krill, Ambassador Vex Laura, and Captain Reynolds occupied seats near the central speaking platform, their location signifying the current importance of their alliance in galactic affairs. Remember the protocol, Krill whispered urgently to Reynolds. The Draconian Confederacy speaks first, followed by. Yeah, Reynolds waved dismissively. Big lizards talk, then the sentient gas clouds, Then the crystal people who take 40 minutes to say hello because they experience time differently. I've been to these rodeos before, Admiral. This is not a rodeo, Krill hissed. It is the most significant diplomatic gathering in 50 cycles. Vex Laura's skin rippled with subtle patterns that indicated suppressed amusement. Perhaps allow Captain Reynolds his Earth metaphors, Admiral. They seem to be as numerous as they are incomprehensible. The Draconian ambassador, a 12-foot reptilian with ceremonial armor that gleamed under the chamber's lights, took the central platform. His forked tongue flicked out, tasting the air before he began speaking. Esteemed colleagues, the translator rendered in the specific dialect preference of each attendee, we gather in the shadow of grave concerns. The Hive Collective's expansionist activities threaten the balance we have strived to maintain. Murmurs rippled through the chamber as various species communicated agreement in their particular ways, from subharmonic rumbles to pheromone releases that the station's environmental systems quickly neutralized. The Draconian continued for several minutes, outlining the situation in careful diplomatic language that conveyed urgency while avoiding direct accusation. As he concluded, the chamber's mood had grown somber. The Confederacy suggests a unified show of military strength at the borders of collective space, the ambassador finished. We must demonstrate that further expansion will not be tolerated. Reynolds leaned back in his seat, audibly scoffing. Every eye, sensory appendage, and perceptual organ in the chamber swiveled toward the human. The Draconian ambassador's scales flushed a deep crimson. Does the human representative wish to contribute something meaningful to these proceedings? Krill's exoskeleton made a sound like cracking ice as he tensed. Vex Laura's luminescence dimmed to barely visible levels. Reynolds stood, stretching casually. Yeah, actually. That plan is basically gift wrapping ourselves for the collective. Gasps and their species-equivalent reactions echoed through the chamber. The Hive Collective isn't like us, Reynolds continued. They don't get intimidated. They calculate. If we mass our ships at their border, they'll just see a convenient buffet line. One-stop shopping for assimilating a bunch of species at once. You suggest we do nothing? The Draconian challenged. Nope. I suggest we do something they won't expect. Reynolds pulled out a small device and tapped it. A holographic display appeared over the central platform, showing the Proxima outpost. They want the quantum relay station, so let's give it to them. The chamber erupted in protests. Silence. Bellowed the moderator, a member of an ancient species whose vocal apparatus could reach volumes physically painful to most attendees. In the subsequent quiet, Reynolds continued. Not the actual station. A fake. A duplicate. One that looks real on scans but is actually rigged with a quantum virus that'll scramble their hive connections faster than my grandmother's egg recipe. The Arcturian representative, a floating collection of crystalline structures, chimed in with a sound like breaking glass. Such deception violates the Treaty of Barnard's Star. Only if we get caught, Reynolds replied with a shrug. And since when do treaties matter to the collective? They're literally trying to absorb all of us into their consciousness. I don't think they're big on reading the fine print. Krill stood abruptly. What Captain Reynolds means to say is that conventional approaches may prove insufficient against an unconventional enemy. Vex Laura rose as well, her bioluminescence brightening confidently. The Luminary Coalition concurs. The collective operates outside our established diplomatic frameworks. Perhaps flexibility is required. The chamber fell into contemplative silence, a rarity in galactic politics. Besides, Reynolds added cheerfully, if it doesn't work, we can always go back to the lineup and get eaten plan. The Draconian ambassador's tail thumped against the platform. Your species' irreverence is matched only by your audacity, human. Thanks, Reynolds replied. We work at it. Surprisingly, the Draconian's mouth curved into what might generously be interpreted as a smile. The Draconian Confederacy is intrigued by this alternative approach. As discussion broke out across the chamber, Krill leaned toward Reynolds. "You planned this disruption." "Planned? Nah. Improvised with style?" "Absolutely." "You've altered the entire diplomatic trajectory of the summit in less than 5 minutes." Reynolds grinned. "That's kind of our thing, Admiral. Humans specialize in derailing carefully laid plans. Sometimes it even works out better than the original." "And when it doesn't?" Krill asked. "That's why we're really good at running away, too." The Proxima outpost hung in space like a glittering jewel, its central hub surrounded by a network of docking arrays, sensor platforms, and defense installations. For centuries, it had served as a neutral port for traders, diplomats, and travelers of all species. Today, however, it was a battlefield. The first wave of Hive Collective ships swarmed the outpost's outer defensive perimeter, their biomechanical vessels moving with the coordinated precision that made them such a terrifying enemy. Unlike conventional fleets with command structures and individual decision-making, the Collective operated as a single organism, each ship an extension of the central Hive mind. On the command deck of the unwavering Precision, Admiral Krill watched the tactical displays with grim focus. "They've breached the outer sensor grid," Commander Thix reported. "Estimated time to penetration of main defenses, 7 minutes. "Where's the human fleet?" Krill demanded, mandibles clicking rapidly, a sign of extreme stress in thoraxians. Vex Laura, who had joined them for the operation, gestured to the far side of the display. Captain Reynolds reported that they're holding position in the asteroid field. "They're waiting." "Waiting? For what? The complete destruction of the outpost?" Krill's exoskeleton creaked as he leaned forward. "This is precisely why the Kularian dynasty fell 3 centuries ago. They relied on human military support, and when the humans employed their unconventional tactics, the Kularians couldn't adapt rapidly enough. I believe that was actually because the Kularians insisted the humans follow Kularian battle doctrine," Vex Laura corrected gently. "According to historical records, the humans suggested hiding their fleet in the rings of Kularia Prime to ambush the invaders. The Kularian High Command rejected the plan as lacking honor and demanded a traditional formation engagement." "And?" Krill asked, though the answer was obvious given the Kularians' extinction. "And the Kularians were annihilated within 6 hours, Vex Laura finished. "The surviving humans renamed the location Told You So rings, which I understand remains on human star charts to this day." The ship shuddered as a stray energy burst from the battle grazed their shields. 30 collective vessels have broken through to the secondary defense line, Thix announced. "They're moving directly toward the quantum relay station." Krill's communicator chirped. "Admiral? Reynolds here. How's the view from your fancy command ship?" "Captain Reynolds," Krill replied with thinly veiled irritation. "The Collective is advancing precisely according to the intelligence projections. The outpost's defenses are failing. Where is your fleet?" "Right where they need to be," Reynolds replied cheerfully. "Say, remember how I mentioned that humans are really good at hiding things?" Krill exchanged puzzled glances with Vex Laura. "I fail to see how human concealment abilities are relevant to our current contact," Thix shouted. Multiple signatures appearing throughout the asteroid field. The tactical display suddenly blossomed with dozens, no, hundreds of new contacts, emerging from hiding places within and behind the asteroids. The human fleet had camouflaged itself using a combination of technology and the natural cover provided by the debris field. "Now, watch this," Reynolds said, audible excitement in his voice. The human vessels began moving in patterns that appeared, to Krill's trained military eye, completely chaotic. Ships darted between asteroids, some flying dangerously close to one another, others seemingly on collision courses with debris before veering away at the last second. "What are they doing?" Krill demanded. Those formations violate every principle of tactical logic. That's kind of the point, Reynolds replied. The collective uses predictive algorithms based on established military doctrines. They anticipate logical moves. We're not doing anything logical. As if to demonstrate his point, several human vessels suddenly accelerated directly toward the collective's flank. At the last moment, they released what appeared to be simple mining charges, crude explosive devices used for breaking up asteroids, then veered away sharply. The charges detonated in sequence, creating a cascading wave of electromagnetic pulses that rippled through the collective formation. Ship after ship lost power, their biomechanical systems temporarily overloaded. "Those are mining charges?" Vexlora asked, incredulous. "Not military weapons?" "Mining charges reconfigured to emit an electromagnetic pulse tuned specifically to the frequency of collective neural networks," Reynolds confirmed. "Look, we know you folks think humans are weirdly obsessed with explosions, and you're not wrong, but sometimes the best weapon isn't a bigger bang, it's the right bang." The tactical display showed the human fleet now moving into the gap created by the disabled collective vessels, forming a protective screen around the quantum relay station. "The collective's second wave is adjusting course," Thix reported. "They appear to be adapting to the human tactics." "Right on schedule," Reynolds said. "Admiral, you might want to cover your third eye for this next part. It gets a little creative." Before Krill could ask what that meant, the display showed several human ships suddenly releasing what looked like garbage. "Are they jettisoning waste material?" Krill asked, mandibles twitching in confusion. "Not waste," Reynolds corrected. "Decoys. Each one's giving off the same quantum signature as the relay station. We've been collecting the signature for weeks and built these little beauties to mimic it." The space around the outpost now contained dozens of small objects, each registering on sensors as a potential quantum relay. The collective ships paused, their perfect coordination momentarily disrupted as the hive mind attempted to determine which target was genuine. "They're confused," Vexlora observed, her bioluminescence brightening with understanding. "The collective operates on certainty, on shared information. You've introduced uncertainty into their system." "Humans call it throwing a wrench in the works," Reynolds said. "Though technically these are more like specialized quantum signature replicators than wrenches, but the principle's the same." Krill watched in amazement as the once coordinated collective fleet broke formation, individual ships pursuing different decoys. "They've fragmented their approach. Their tactical cohesion is deteriorating." "That's the thing about a hive mind," Reynolds said. "Great when everything's clear-cut. Not so great when faced with ambiguity. They're literally arguing with themselves right now about which target to prioritize." As they watched, the Thoraxian and Luminari vessels moved into position alongside the human fleet, engaging the now disorganized collective ships. What should have been an overwhelming force was now scattered, confused, and vulnerable. "I owe you an apology, Captain Reynolds," Krill said quietly. "I underestimated the effectiveness of human unpredictability." "No apology needed, Admiral. Just doing what humans do best, making a mess that somehow works out in the end." The war room aboard the Unwavering Precision had been converted into an impromptu strategic planning center for the Allied forces. Holographic displays covered every surface, showing the current position of the collective fleet, which had retreated to regroup after their failed assault on Proxima Outpost. Admiral Krill stood at the central table, his forearms manipulating the tactical display with practiced precision. Ambassador Vexlora observed from one side, her bioluminescence subdued to avoid interfering with the projections. Representatives from 17 other species were present, either physically or via secure quantum hologram. The only person sitting was Captain Reynolds, who had his boots propped up on the edge of the table and was absent-mindedly tossing a small stress ball decorated with Earth's continents from hand to hand. "The collective has withdrawn to the Sigma Nebula," Krill was explaining. "Our analysis suggests they are consolidating their forces for a larger, more coordinated attack." We estimate we have 78 hours before they launch their counter-offensive. 78 hours and 11 minutes, corrected the Quantari representative, a species renowned for their temporal perception. Assuming standard collective biomechanical regeneration rates. The question, Vexlora interjected smoothly, is how we respond. Our deception at Proxima worked once, but the collective will have adapted. They won't fall for the same strategy twice. The Draconian general, joining via hologram, rumbled in agreement. We must strike before they recover. A preemptive attack on their position in the nebula. With all due respect, General, Krill replied, engaging the collective in nebula conditions would put our forces at a significant disadvantage. Their biomechanical sensors operate more efficiently than ours in ionized gas environments. What about a long-range bombardment? Suggested the Mclosian commander, their tentacles waving as they spoke. Our new quantum torpedoes could penetrate the nebula's outer layers and alert them to our exact position, countered Vexlora. We would lose the element of surprise. As the discussion continued, with each species advocating for tactics that aligned with their particular military traditions, Reynolds continued bouncing his stress ball, his expression growing increasingly amused. Finally, he caught the ball and sat up. You know what's great about this room? He asked, interrupting the Arcturian representative mid-sentence. The war room fell silent, all attention turning to the human. I mean, aside from the impressive tech and the fact that we've got species in here who used to enthusiastically eat each other just a few centuries ago, Reynolds continued. What's great is that everyone's thinking about how to fight the collective using conventional warfare. Shoot them, bomb them, outmaneuver them. He tossed the ball up again. Classic. Krill's mandibles clicked in irritation. If you have a constructive suggestion, Captain Reynolds, please share it with the Council. Oh, I do, Reynolds said, standing up and walking to the holographic display of the Sigma Nebula. Let's not fight them at all. The room erupted in a cacophony of protests, from the subsonic rumbles of the Draconian to the high-pitched trills of the Aviani representatives. Explain, demanded the Mechanoid Synod's delegate, their vocal synthesizer cutting through the noise. Reynolds grinned. The collective thinks as one mind, right? That's their whole thing. They share information instantaneously across their network. When one knows something, they all know it. This is established fact, Krill said impatiently. Please proceed to the relevant point. The relevant point, my exoskeletal friend Reynolds said, is that we don't need to destroy their ships. We need to feed them information so horrible, so contradictory, so fundamentally wrong that their entire hive mind has an existential crisis. The room fell into confused silence. I don't understand, the Mclosian commander admitted. What information could possibly cause such a reaction? Human memes, Reynolds replied with absolute seriousness. Vexlora's bioluminescence flickered rapidly, the luminary equivalent of a surprised blink. I'm familiar with the concept from our cultural exchanges, but I fail to see how human humor could function as a weapon. Not just memes, Reynolds clarified. The worst of human philosophy, paradoxes, logical fallacies, and cognitive biases all packaged together. We bombard their central communication node with the most mind-bending, contradictory, and absurd content humanity has produced over thousands of years. He manipulated the display to show the center of the nebula. Their communication hub is here. We send in a small stealth vessel, one of ours. Humans are good at being sneaky and upload directly to their network the complete works of Nietzsche, Kafka, and every internet argument about whether a hot dog is a sandwich. We throw in some visual paradoxes. The complete history of human fashion choices, and for good measure, all 10 seasons of Friends. The Quantari representative's temporal perception organs visibly contracted in distress. The paradoxical and inconsistent nature of such content would create computational difficulties for a hive mind attempting to process it simultaneously across all nodes. Computational difficulties, Reynolds repeated. It'll be like pouring sand into an engine. The Zelvorian Empire tried something similar a century ago, using logic bombs against the collective. Problem was, they used perfect, elegant Zelvorian logic. Beautiful stuff, really. Totally ineffective. And the Zelvorians? Asked the Draconian general, though the room already knew the answer. Extinct within a week, Reynolds confirmed. The collective simply isolated the logical paradoxes and deleted them. But human culture isn't logical. It's messy, contradictory, and full of content that somehow simultaneously means nothing and everything. We can't even agree amongst ourselves what half our own cultural references mean. Krill studied the display thoughtfully. The disruption would be temporary at best. Long enough for us to access their navigational systems and send them detailed directions to the completely empty SETI Alpha sector, Reynolds countered. By the time they sort out their hive mind, they'll be halfway across the galaxy chasing ghosts. This plan violates 7 different military doctrines, Krill noted. 12, actually, Reynolds corrected. I counted. It counted. The Arcturian representative chimed discordantly. The Bendu oligarchy attempted an unconventional strategy against the collective. They deployed experimental technology rather than following established protocols. And, prompted Vex Laura. Their homeworld is now a collective processing hub, the Arcturian finished. The difference was that the Bendu acted from desperation rather than strategy. They deployed untested technology without understanding its implications. Whereas humans have been testing the limits of logical inconsistency for our entire existence, Reynolds said proudly. It's practically our evolutionary niche. Krill was silent for a long moment, his 4 eyes blinking in sequence as he processed the proposal. Finally, he turned to the assembled representatives. I move that we authorize Captain Reynolds' plan, with the addition of conventional forces positioned to take advantage of any collective disorganization. The vote that followed wasn't unanimous. The mechanoids and Arcturians abstained, but the majority approved. As the meeting adjourned, Krill approached Reynolds. This plan of yours defies all rational military thought. Thanks, Reynolds replied with a grin. That's what makes it perfect. The collective expects rational opponents. What they're getting is humanity in all our glorious, messy, contradictory splendor. And if it fails? Krill asked. Reynolds shrugged. Then we go with Plan B, really big explosions. We're good at those too. The observation deck of the Unwavering Precision offered a panoramic view of the Sigma Nebula, its swirling gases illuminated by the distant stars beyond. Admiral Krill, Ambassador Vex Laura, and representatives from the allied species stood in reverent silence as they watched the final phase of Reynolds' plan unfold. On the main display, a small dot represented the human stealth vessel approaching the collective's central communications hub, a massive biomechanical structure floating in the nebula's heart. Approaching upload point, came the pilot's voice over the comm system. No sign they've detected us yet. Reynolds stood slightly apart from the others, uncharacteristically still as he watched the operation he'd devised. Upload initiated, the pilot reported. Transmitting cultural package now. For several tense minutes, nothing seemed to happen. The collective ships remained in their formation, the communication hub showed no external changes, and the nebula continued its slow, cosmic dance. Did it fail? Krill asked quietly. Give it a minute, Reynolds replied. Even a hive mind needs time to process 6,000 years of human contradictions. As if on cue, the display showed movement. At first it was subtle, a few collective ships drifting slightly out of formation. Then more noticeable, as entire sections of their fleet began moving in different directions. They're fragmenting, Vex Laura observed, her bioluminescence brightening with excitement. The hive connection is destabilizing. The communications officer's voice came urgently over the ship's speakers. Admiral, we're detecting massive amounts of internal communications within the collective fleet. Their bandwidth usage has increased by 8,000%. Reynolds grinned. They're arguing with themselves, probably about whether cereal is soup. Over the next hour, the assembled allies watched in amazement as the once coordinated collective devolved into chaos. Ships moved in contradictory patterns, some accelerating away from the nebula entirely, others circling back on themselves. Second phase complete, reported the stealth vessel. Navigational coordinates for CT Alpha successfully implanted in their systems. As they watched, the majority of the collective fleet slowly reoriented itself, and in a ragged formation that bore no resemblance to their usual precision, it accelerated to FTL speeds toward the empty reaches of the SETI Alpha sector. A cheer went up from the observation deck, species expressing jubilation in their various ways, from the thunderous foot stomping of the Draconians to the harmonic resonance trills of the Aviani. It worked, Krill said, mandibles spread in the thoraxian expression of amazement. They actually left. Not all of them, Reynolds cautioned, pointing to the display where a small contingent of collective vessels remained. The upload didn't affect every ship, but we've reduced their force by about 90%. The remainder we can handle through conventional means, Krill said confidently. The combined fleet should move to engage. He was interrupted by the communications officer, Admiral. The remaining collective vessels are transmitting a message. They're requesting terms of surrender. A stunned silence fell over the observation deck. Surrender? Vexlora repeated incredulously. The collective has never surrendered in recorded history. Reynolds leaned against the viewport railing. Guess they got to the existentialist philosophy portion of the upload. Nothing makes you reconsider your life choices quite like Sartre. In the days that followed, as the Allied fleet secured the nebula and established monitoring outposts to track the collective's movements, the news of the victory spread rapidly across the galaxy. The remaining collective ships, their hive connection permanently disturbed by the human cultural upload, requested asylum and individual recognition, a concept previously unthinkable for their species. 1 week after the battle, Admiral Krill found Reynolds in the Unwavering Precision's recreation deck, teaching several Thoraxian officers how to play poker. Captain, Krill greeted him formally. The Allied Council has requested your presence at the victory ceremony on the galactic capital. Reynolds looked up from his cards. Fancy medals and long speeches? Not really my thing, Admiral. Nevertheless, your attendance is strongly encouraged. Krill hesitated, then added, the Arcturian Collective has formally requested an alliance with humanity. As have the Mechanoid Synod, the Draconian Confederacy, and 7 other previously neutral powers. Amazing what almost getting assimilated by a hive mind will do for interspecies cooperation, Reynolds remarked, laying down his cards to the dismay of the Thoraxian officers. Full house, gentlemen. Better luck next hand. Krill waited until the officers had departed before speaking again. There is one more matter, Captain. I have been authorized to offer humanity an expanded role within the Thoraxian defense structure. Your unconventional approaches have proven their value. Reynolds raised an eyebrow. Never thought I'd see the day when the most orderly empire in the galaxy would willingly invite chaos into their ranks. Not chaos, Krill corrected. Creativity, adaptability, the very qualities we Thoraxians sometimes lack. His mandibles clicked in what Reynolds had come to recognize as embarrassment. I have also been instructed to request human cultural advisors for our military academies. Cultural advisors? Reynolds repeated, amused. You want us to teach young Thoraxians how to think like humans? Precisely, Krill confirmed, though I have also put in a personal request for stress management counseling. I find that after working with humans, my exoskeleton requires more frequent maintenance from the tension. Reynolds laughed and clapped Krill on his armored shoulder. That's the wisest thing any empire has ever done, Admiral. The smart ones know when to adapt. He grinned and shuffled the deck of cards. Want to learn how to bluff? It's a vital human skill. Krill's mandibles twitched the closest thing to a smile his physiology allowed. Perhaps another time. For now, Minin Doi. I must prepare my report to the High Command explaining how we defeated the most formidable enemy in galactic history by uploading human cat videos and philosophical debates about whether water is wet. Don't forget the dancing tutorials, Reynolds added. My personal theory is that the Macarena is what finally broke them. As Krill departed, Vexlora glided into the recreation deck, her bioluminescence creating gentle patterns that Reynolds had learned to interpret as thoughtful contemplation. So it's true what they say, she noted, watching Reynolds shuffle cards with practiced ease. The empires that ally with humanity survive. Those that dismiss you become interesting subjects for future archaeological expeditions, Reynolds finished with a shrug. It's not like we plan it that way. We're just really good at surviving, and that tends to rub off on our friends. Vexlora's light patterns shifted to what Reynolds recognized as amusement. The Luminari have an ancient saying, the most brilliant light often casts the strangest shadows. I believe humanity embodies this perfectly. Reynolds considered this for a moment, then smiled. I'll take that as a compliment, Ambassador. As it was intended, she replied, her glow brightening. Now, these poker lessons I've heard about, I believe the Luminari Diplomatic Corps would benefit from such training as well. Across the galaxy, intelligence officers, military strategists, and political leaders scrambled to secure alliances with the peculiar species from Earth. Enrollment in human studies courses reached unprecedented levels. And in the grand archives of galactic history, another name was added to the long list of extinct empires who had made the fatal error of underestimating humanity. The smart ones learned. The dead ones hadn't. It really was that simple.